Yeah, so my background is kind of all to say I'm very much a computer nerd and lots of other kinds of nerd too. So one thing I like to do when I'm giving talks, since we can't get together in person anymore, thanks to COVID, is to give away swag. And the way I like to do it is to put up backgrounds in Zoom behind me of things like history of computing images and anime or video games, and the first person to guess them wins. I'm not going to do that unless folks are interested. So if you're interested in winning some swag, just throw something into the Q&A so Civi and I can see it, and I'll go ahead and do that. All right, what I'm talking about here today is building secure S3. Okay, the title kind of says it all, but there's actually a fair amount to doing that well, and we're gonna drill into that. So the agenda, I don't have a lot of slides. I don't like slides too much when I'm on the receiving end of them. I suspect you probably don't either. So we just have a handful where I'm going to kind of set the stage for okay, we've got some interest. Once I get through describing the agenda, I will throw up a cool background, or at least what I think is a cool background. So we'll see if you do. So a little bit on why cloud security is different. The attack surface in cloud is very different than the attack surfaces in the data center. And I'm going to go into that. I'm going to go into a deep dive on security of Amazon S3, and I'm going to do that mostly with a whiteboard and with the AWS console and a little bit of a code editor. If you don't write code, don't leave now. I'm going to explain exactly what I'm going to show you, and you will get it, I promise. Okay, and then we'll have Q&A, but I like Q&A all the way through. All right, so feel free to throw something up there. Civi and I are both watching, and I'll respond as soon as I notice. All right. Okay, so I want to talk about cloud misconfiguration. Cloud misconfiguration, according to Gartner, is by far the #1 risk in cloud computing. Almost every major breach happens because of usually a collection of misconfigurations. So the press will often say, oh, somebody left a S3 bucket completely public. They're often wrong when they say that. It's often more subtle, more nuanced. And so we're going to talk about a lot of that nuance, because today we're focused, of course, on S3. Every year, approximately, Fugue does a survey of hundreds of organizations that are operating at scale on the cloud. We are all about security and compliance in the cloud. I worked a lot on that when I was at Amazon, and we want to understand how people are viewing this. So these figures here, the percentages and the words above them, are from those surveys. So 84% of respondents, and I think there were about 300 or so companies in this survey, said they are concerned they've been hacked and don't know it. I'm really happy that's as high as 84%. It should be 100. All three of these should be 100. But I'm glad they're as high as they are. So why would somebody be concerned that they've been hacked and don't know it? I'm going to use a couple examples from the press and from Department of Justice filings to kind of point this out. So famously, over a year ago now, Capital One was breached and data was stolen out of S3. Now, I have friends, good friends at Capital One. They are awesome at what they do. When I bring up these specific examples, it's not to be pejorative to these organizations, because there before the grace of God go we all, kind of thing. I don't mean that religiously. It means the saying, like, we're all in danger of these things. So I'm not criticizing them, but we can learn a lot from that hack, from the Imperva hack, from the Uber hack. And in all these cases, the only way the organizations found out was either through the hacker bragging on social media, or an extortion was made. So that means that these very, very sophisticated, capable engineering teams can't notice, and I'm going to explain some of why they typically don't notice with S3 breaches. It is very likely that if you've been hacked, you won't know until something happens with the hacked information. All right, so 84% were concerned with that. That is good. We should all be concerned with that. 92% concerned they're vulnerable to a cloud breach. Again, I like 100 better because I live and breathe this stuff, and I know that we're all at risk in the cloud. Now, the cloud can be configured correctly the most secure computing platform ever made by humans. But slight misconfigurations and misunderstandings of how the security policies work and how the security model works mean that it is very likely, if you point, for example, Fugue, our product, at your AWS account, it's very likely we're going to paint some things red in our visualization to tell you there are some vulnerabilities that we know about, because it's just really hard to get this 100% right. So that's kind of why we exist. But yeah, 92% are concerned they're vulnerable to a cloud breach. If you're in the cloud, you're potentially vulnerable. And then 3/4, a little north of 3/4, said misconfiguration risk will increase or stay the same this year. It will increase. It won't stay the same. It certainly won't go down. And the reasons are fairly straightforward. Most folks who have adopted cloud increase their footprint in cloud over time. Every single resource you build in cloud, whether it's a container, a Lambda function, we just taught a class yesterday on Lambda security where we could breach a Lambda function and shell out of it and SQL inject it. Every S3 bucket, which is our focus today, every one of those is attack surface. So if you're growing your cloud footprint, by definition, you are growing the attack surface that can be exploited due to misconfigurations. But also, there are new cloud services all the time. So becoming an expert, and I'm going to show you in this on S3, but this is true for all the services, you really have to understand how to secure those resources and those components. And so as new services roll out, if you're adopting those, you have to learn new things to be secure. So it's going up. I'm here to tell you, I'm sorry, but it is. Okay. So I want to talk a little about hacker strategy and how hackers are commonly getting to folks' cloud accounts. And right after this slide, I'm going to throw up a background for you guys or you folks to take a shot at. So the kind of Hollywood version of a hack is, a group of deep experts gather together in a room drinking coffee till 4 a.m, targeting a particular organization and attacking that organization very intentionally. Okay, that does happen, right? Sony was spearphished because North Korea did not like a movie they made. Stuxnet is another example. But it's actually far less common than hackers using automation to discover misconfigurations on public IP addresses, on public endpoints. So for example, Claire, the woman who did the Capital One hack famously, she wasn't targeting them. She was running automation to find anyone who had a particular misconfiguration, just going through all of those either DNS endpoints or IP address ranges or what have you, and providing a shopping list of vulnerable systems with the vulnerability in the shopping list. Okay, so here John Breeden saying skilled or well-funded hacker groups are employing automation to discover and exploit misconfigured cloud assets within hours of their deployment. I have more bad news for you. It's not hours, it's minutes, is what we have seen. So when you put something out there, it doesn't matter who you are or if you think you're a likely target. If you've misconfigured it, the hackers are just looking at everything and then selecting what to breach once they see that misconfiguration. Okay. All right. The next slide. I'm saying okay too much. I'm going to stop doing that. This is the second to last slide. So I'm going to end my slideshow. So if you can name this computer, you will win. I think at least a T-shirt. Yep. I think in this case, you don't need to name the model. David, you got it right. This is the Xerox Alto, the first commercial product to have a graphical user interface with a mouse, and I believe it even had Ethernet. That was also invented at Xerox PARC, where this came from. And of course, famously, Steve Jobs paid Xerox $100,000 to walk through the Palo Alto Research Center and learn stuff, and hence the Lisa and the Macintosh came out, and then of course Windows also. All right, I'm going to go back to screen sharing, and I'm going to do some whiteboarding here. Okay, let's just share a whiteboard. Sivia, are you seeing my whiteboard?
I am. Hang on, there's a delay.
All right, well, I'm going to, okay, yeah, there we go. So what I want to talk about here is a mental model by which you can think about security of S3. And why is a mental model important? Because it's really easy to get overwhelmed with all of the details. It's really easy to have the complexities feel kind of insurmountable, and to really get buried in the weeds without understanding what's important. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is talk generically about policy in AWS, because that is how you secure things in AWS, is use of policy. And policy crosses a number of services, IAM, S3 itself. There are lots of places where policy is used. So in the AWS universe, there are three main things you need to consider. There are some others, but it's getting a little more in the weeds. The three main things are principals. Okay, and principals are things like users. Call this guy Joe. But also things like processes running on, EC2 or Lambda. They're actors. They're things that are calling the next thing in line, which is actions. Now, today we're talking about S3, but the way I like to think about cloud is it's really just a big pile of actions that cross over lots and lots of different services. Okay, so for S3, it's things like list buckets. I'm writing in human words, not in like the actual exact name, or get objects, etc. And we're going to go into these, but these are the verbs of the cloud. Okay, and then there are resources. Now, resources are things like actual S3 buckets. We'll call this one foo. Or similarly, lambdas, or EC2, whatever. These are the objects of the cloud. You, in fact, use actions to create them, actions to destroy them. But once they're instantiated, they have, we'll call this lambda bar, and we'll call this EC2 baz. They get names, they have identifiers, ARNs, things like that. Now, does anyone know what there is a default policy in everything in AWS as it relates to both actions and to resources? Does anyone know what it is? Throw it in the Q&A if you do. Oh, Alan made an interesting comment. Bill Atkinson built region redraw into the original Mac because he thought he saw that at Park, but he actually didn't. It's amazing how our mistakes can be good. Okay, I'm not getting an answer, so yeah, Alan says default deny. Thank you, Alan. So the way I think about this, using this pattern, this mental model, is that there's kind of a wall of denial from any principal to use any action on any resource. So when we're thinking about AWS security, what we're really doing is opening holes through those walls of denial. And so, for example, if I want Joe to be able to, list buckets, I need to create an IAM policy. Generally speaking, that would be my suggestion. There's actually multiple layers of S3 security. Some of them, like ACLs, you just shouldn't use anymore. They're dated. The two I'm going to focus on today are IAM policies, which grant allowances, right, as opposed to denials, and then also bucket policies. Okay, so that lists buckets or get object. If Joe can do either of those, then he can perform those actions on this S3 bucket over in the resources. I hope this is making clear sense. The reason I put this up is having a simple mental model is really important when dealing with massive complexity. And we are talking about massive complexity here. I didn't say complication because complication is manufactured complexity. In the case of S3, it's just an extraordinarily powerful service with a lot of features, okay? And powers a significant portion of the internet. What I'm showing you here is part of our product where we do this visualization of these things, but we can look at some S3 buckets here, and there's a lot to say about S3 buckets and a lot to say about configuring them. So on the left here, I'm showing you a lot of those configurable options. All right, we're down a little past the bottom of the hour. So I'm going to do another background. And now, if you won already today, don't guess because you can't win twice. Sivia tells me that's the rule. I follow the rule. All right. So don't guess because somebody else might want to guess. All right, let's go to let's do a video game. All right, this is highly time relevant. Name this video game, get a t-shirt. All right, while I'm waiting on some okay, this is interesting. So David said deny all, that's true. Alan also said DAD, default deny, explicit allow, explicit deny. That is exactly correct. And what we're going to show here is how you can, you automatically go in with default deny. Rich got it. This is the new Yakuza. It's awesome. Just saying. All right. We'll move on. I love it when the first response is correct. Okay, yeah, so what does that mean? Default deny, thank you for putting that in there, Alan. Default deny, explicit allow, explicit deny is kind of like if you think about that three-stage model where there's deny between principles and let me get back to it here. There's a deny between principles and actions, and then a deny between actions and resources. And we'll look at this in actual policy code in a minute. When you use an IAM role, for example, or an IAM policy to open up actions on resources, if you are opening up, for example, I see this a lot, star on resources, then the explicit deny at the end can be expressed in the form of a bucket policy. So what I would recommend as you're thinking about S3 is you're going to have IAM roles and policies, and each bucket should have a bucket policy that can then filter down the allowances granted in the IAM role. Okay, there's other ways you can do that too, but this is where I recommend beginning. as you're thinking about this. So let's take a look at that.
Josh?
All right. Yes, Sivia.
Sorry, there is a question that I thought might be interesting here. Ted asks, could you list top 3 risk avoidance or mitigation industry practices in cloud security? And as a follow-up, specifically for AWS, is there a guideline or standard or recommendation from AWS that makes our buckets configured securely?
So this is an interesting question. There are capabilities that I'm going to show you some now that allow you to make secure buckets. I'm going to show you a bunch of that. I can't teach you everything about it in 45 minutes, but I'm going to show you generally how to do that. There is a lot of people say to me, why doesn't AWS just make it safe? The answer is because people use S3 for all kinds of different things. So depending on your use case, safe has different different priorities. Also, things like, for example, having an EC2 instance, like if I'm going back to my diagram here, if this EC2 instance right here has, you can see here its IAM instance profile says S3 read write. If that compute instance has list permissions for S3 with resource star, that's extraordinarily dangerous because like in the Capital One breach, 700 buckets were drained. Well, how did you get the names of the 700 buckets? Clearly, the compute instance or container that was had a misconfiguration had permission to list S3. Okay, so there is no one easy answer. There's no easy button for this. You really just do have to learn the topic fairly well. A lot of folks think that here, let's just build a bucket, and I'm going to walk you through the decisions that you might choose to make as you do this. And let's just create one. All right, let's make a new one. Let's call it Community Day. Yay. All right, we'll put it in a region. We're not going to copy our settings from a bucket because they changed the interface on me since I last did this. So hopefully I can the demo gods will smile on me and I can fumble my way through this newer interface that I'm used to. So the very first thing you see here after giving it a name is block public access. And here we have checked block all public access. Does that mean that no one on the internet can get to the bucket? Since we're on a delay, I'm going to answer my own question. The answer is it does not mean that. It does not mean that. Let's go take a look at it. By the way, you should turn this on unless your bucket is intended to be completely public. Yeah, Alan says you shouldn't have resource star, but there's plenty of examples of IAM policies in AWS source code that do, and I've seen it a lot in the real world. I'm not a fan of putting stars anywhere for lots of reasons. However, I'm also not a fan of listing tons of explicit bucket names in IAM policies. There is a new-ish feature called attribute-based access controls that I think are awesome, where you use tags to filter which principles and policies have access to particular resources. And I believe that is, in my opinion, a more scalable model. But let's talk about public access. So to understand what we're getting when we block public access, we need to understand AWS's definition of public, right? So Amazon S3 considers a bucket or ACL public if it grants any permissions to the members of predefined all users or authenticated users groups, okay? When evaluating a bucket policy, and this is what block public access is going to be doing, right? Yeah, Alan says there's a good AWS tech talk on ABAC. That's true. It is good. And I recommend it to our customers all the time, use that feature. But let's talk about the meaning of public. Okay, so if you grant to like all users or authenticated users, block public access is going to complain at you or prevent it. Okay, it's not going to allow it. But when evaluating a bucket policy, S3 begins by assuming the policy is public. Okay, that's a good assumption, right? We want to be, it's kind of the other side of deny everything, right? Default deny is assume everything's dangerous, which we should always do. So it's doing that, that's cool. But then this is where people get in trouble. A bucket policy must grant access only to fixed values that don't contain a wildcard, no stars, of one of the following. And the very first thing here is CIDR blocks. CIDR blocks can be a great many IP addresses. Okay. So, and block public access isn't going to catch that. So you want to use it, but don't believe you're safe by checking it. Okay. All right. Bucket versioning. We're talking about building secure S3. I would enable in almost all cases, unless you truly have ephemeral data that it doesn't matter if it's lost forever. I would turn this on personally in most cases. All right, you generally want to add tags. That has less to do with security, but it's a good idea. All right, let's talk about encryption for a second. So a lot of folks think server-side encryption, just this little like checkbox here, and is going to really help keep your data safe. I don't think it does much other than check a box and some compliance standards. And we deal with compliance standards all the time at Fugue. I mean, yes, you want to have your data encrypted at rest. The problem with the default Amazon S3 key style encryption is if you have read access to that S3 bucket, the data is going to come out in plain text. It's going to get decrypted on the way out. So I would suggest if you care enough about the data to encrypt it, I would go ahead and use a KMS key. Even okay if you use an AWS managed key, you might have policies that you want to use, KMS stuff that you're controlling more. But so why is this safer? It's safer for the following reason. If I have an IAM permission to list or read S3, and it is, particularly in read, it is encrypted, right? Using standard server-side encryption. As long as I have that read access, I'm getting plain text data out. I'm getting unencrypted data out. Now, if I'm using a KMS key that either Amazon's managing or I'm managing, I need also IAM access to that KMS key. And what a lot of cloud hacking is all about is discovery and access. So the more things you put in front of the hacker that they have to get access to, the harder their job is. I hope that makes sense. We've got this delay. I'm used to doing these things kind of live. Let's look at advanced settings. All right, object lock is an interesting, it's in many cases you don't need this. It's write once, read many. It's effectively a thing you can add on top of the version bucket thing that basically doesn't allow mutation of old records. So if you're doing things like legal records or medical records, things that have legal requirements for what are called records, you probably know if you have those. This is good for that. In a lot of use cases, it's not appropriate or needed. All right, so that is a little bit on building one of these and just walking you through the different things. I want to switch gears here, and we're down to about 10 minutes, so I'm going to do it pretty quick, to talking specifically about IAM policy creation and bucket policies. Okay, so let's go into IAM and let's create a policy. Now, a lot of folks say, if you just do IAM right, you won't be vulnerable. Sure, but do IAM right is not the easiest thing in the world. Okay, so in S3, and there are implications that a lot of folks don't understand. So if we just look at, so what I'm doing here is I'm finding remember I said actions in our diagram, we had right here actions, right? That's That's these guys right here. So I could say all S3 actions. That's right at the top. That should be like buried under advanced or something, in my opinion. Like that. You should almost never do that. But in each of these access levels, like you might think to yourself, hey, list isn't a big deal. I'll just check everything list. Well, list all my buckets list bucket, right? We know from the DOJ filing that the hacker in the Capital One breach used a command called sync, which is an AWS command line command, and it requires list permission. I would never turn on list permission for running compute instances or other things in the infrastructure. Obviously, you need it for humans in certain roles. But one of the things Fugue, for example, will do with some of our own policy checks, we do all the NIST and HIPAA and GDPR and CIS and all that stuff, but we add our own because all those don't have anything to say about this. But if you've got a container and EC2 instance with like list on S3 star resources, you have given a map to the hackers to steal your data. And AWS provides a command in Amazon Linux to just say sync bucket A to bucket B, and there it goes. So, so a lot of times folks are not fully understanding. The best way to understand security in cloud is to understand breaches in cloud. All right, and so there are things that seem innocuous that are quite dangerous. Let me switch to a code editor real quick, and don't run away. I'm going to explain this stuff. I mentioned that back to my diagram. So the IAM policy, and this is really, there's an IAM policy that gets attached to these principles. So maybe that's like a developer policy for an actual user. And what I had, was that S3 read-write policy was the name of it on my EC2 instance, and that's granting allowances. So let's go look at that. Let's just grab an IAM policy that's about S3. So here you can say we're saying allow S3 get object version. This is just like, all the list actions and the gets. And you see there's quite a few of them. And this is often why people do check those big boxes that say, give me all those ones and all those ones. Because a lot of these, unless you really know what you're doing, like S3 get access point policy status. I know what an access point is. An access point is like a kind of proxy with different bucket policies on it and names for AWS policy, but not everyone does. And so people tend to just grab collections because they don't always know the specific details. But you can see here the very things that I talked about in that diagram. Here are actions, right? This is a collection of actions. We had a block up above, collection of actions. And the resource here is ARN AWS S3 anything. Okay, so if you're thinking about code management and you're adding new buckets all the time, when you're starting out, you might say, well, I'm going to put in that resource block just the name of the bucket I need access to. Well, you're going to really proliferate your IAM policies if you do that, because every time you have new buckets or collections of buckets, you need to write new IAM policies. Now you have to maintain those policies. And sometimes that's the right choice. If we build everything we do using mostly Lambda, almost all Lambda, and we believe that each Lambda function should have its own IAM role, its own policy. We auto generate those, okay? And there are hundreds of them for us, but it's a pain. And this is where attribute-based access control can be your friend. But before getting into the fancy stuff with attribute-based access control, there are other ways to deny things you've allowed. Okay, so here we're in the IAM policy, we're allowing all these different actions on all S3 resources, right? Oh, yeah, okay. I thought maybe I missed some comments there, but I think I've seen them all. Sorry. But then we have what's called a bucket policy, and the bucket policy is attached not to the principal, but to the resource. And my strong recommendation is that so in other words, you can add denial to something attached to this particular resource. Okay. And there are different ways you can do that. What I'm going to show you here is a way you can do that based on the topology of your application. So let's jump back to my Fugue diagram so we can visualize this. And where is it? Here it is. So what I have here, and we built this whole visualizer because, man, when I was at AWS, I had to do Visios and diagrams all the time. They were wrong as soon as you got done with them because the environment was changing. So we'll visualize this stuff for you. But you see this EC2 instance lives within a VPC network, and that VPC network has an endpoint. So requests coming from this EC2 instance are going to traverse this endpoint and thence the S3 buckets. Now, on this EC2 instance, it's named not in the right VPC. We're not going to go through that endpoint, right? When S3 gets queried, it is not going to be coming from that endpoint, and it is not going to have an IP address in the CIDR block of this VPC above. All right. So how do we express that in bucket policy? You do it like this. So we've got the IAM policy that says resource star on S3, right? It wasn't like all AWS resources. It was all S3. But then we can attach at the resource level on individual buckets, things like this. So let's look at this again. So here, our effect is deny right here. Come on, Josh, use your mouse brush. There we go. So before we were allowing actions, here we're denying them, right? And the principle here is all. We are denying to all principals in the world, in all of Amazon, any S3 actions. This is where stars are cool, by the way. Where they're not dangerous is when you're denying with them, okay? Allowances are dangerous. So we're denying everything on this resource named important records. That's one of my S3 buckets. Remember, this is a bucket policy. So it applies to a particular bucket. You can apply it to more, but in this case, we're doing one. And the condition, and this you have to, it's kind of a double negative. So we're saying deny everything unless the string doesn't equal. Wait, I always get confused in trying to describe this. Basically, string not equals is don't deny if it's that VPC endpoint, and it's this CIDR block in the source IP. So this, what does that end in? EBC0. If we go back over here, you'll see, yeah, it's it's got EBC0. So what that bucket policy is going to do, if I apply it to this important records bucket right here, is it is going to allow IAM allowances through the policy stack only if those requests are coming from within that VPC through that VPC endpoint. Okay. So what you have here as you think about this, and we're right near the top of the hour, so I'm about to shut up and go jump over and answer any questions in the chat. But what we have here is an opening up and then a choking down. Okay, so it's okay to, you need to understand that so that you can open. Yes, Alan, thank you. It is sometimes hard to parse the double negative logic. Yes, I agree with you. I read a lot of Open Policy Agent, and I can think about it more easily than I can talk about it for some strange reason. But what I want you to take from this is you can open stuff over here, right? Let me get my eraser going. You can open a fairly broad thing. You can open it here through IAM as well. You know, maybe you got a whole swath of actions here. But then you can close them back down with resource policies. And that's where I would start. To summarize, I would generally always use, unless it's literally a public website or some set of resources that you want the whole internet to see, I would use block public access. I would not sleep well if that's all I did. I believe that every S3 bucket should have bucket policies on it. And what that does for you is it helps you not have to be perfect with IAM policies, but you should also try to be perfect with IAM policies. So we're at the end here. I think I've got like 1 minute. I don't really have a minute, but I'm going to throw up one more background because you guys have been great. I'm going to stop sharing. This one's an anime. Name the anime this thing is from and win a t-shirt. Waiting for the lag. This thing's about a minute behind. I think it's more than a minute behind. Well, yeah, we'll just hang out.
It's hard. People don't know. But while we're waiting, I also wanted to let people know that Fugue is doing a masterclass on Thursday, this coming Thursday, with Corey Quinn. Some of you may know him from Screaming in the Cloud, and we will be, and you can go to fugue.co/masterclass and sign up for that. And no, it's not Star Wars.
No. I like the commentary there. I'm not going to read it out loud, but it's pretty funny. Okay, I think we're out of time. I want to respect the next speakers and so on. So
we are. And Josh, do you want to reveal or leave it for maybe during a master class?
It's from Akira.
Okay, there you go.
It's from Akira, and if you haven't watched Akira, it's really cool. You should watch it, and it doesn't make you a weeb. Yep. All right. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to jump over to answer any questions you have, and I really appreciate the interaction and you taking the time to sit through this session, and hopefully I taught you a little something about S3. Let me know. Yes or no. Either way, let me know. All right. Thanks, everyone.